just did close to the podium since I had to talk.
May I please have everybody's attention? Hello? If we could, for those who want to go ahead, could you take your seats, please? We're going to start the second half of our Landlord Symposium. For those of you who brought your lunches back, please feel free to go ahead and continue to have those lunches. Of course, we also have some additional afternoon snacks for you guys. Please feel free to help yourself. However, today, come on over here. Come on, Gary. We'll wait. Yeah, that's what happens. You come last. Come on, feel free to walk in front of me. The camera's running. Just say cheese on your way through. 1, 2, cheese. Okay, now on the count of 3, everybody say, finally, Gary, y'all in the house. 1, 2, 3. Finally, Gary, y'all in the house. We'll give y'all a break. We know y'all have to come the farthest away in the state, so we will give you some grace, and we'll extend that. But I do want to say we wouldn't have this venue, we wouldn't be able to be here today if it was not for IHCDA. They are a great partner to our agency and to our office, and I'm delighted that we have Matt Rayburn here with us today. He is the Deputy Executive Director of the Indiana Housing and Community Development Authority. They have a statewide program for most of the programs that we operate, including the Section 8 program. So it is my honor to thank Jake, who couldn't be with us here today, but Matt for making time to be here with us. So Matt, with that, thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for allowing me to be here today. I'd like to just reciprocate Kimberly's comments and just say how much IHCDA values the partnership with HUD and the fact that we were able to work together to bring this first of its kind event for HUD to try this event here in Indiana first, and we're honored to be selected for that. I was asked to give just a few opening remarks today, and then we're going to have a panel where multiple PHAs from across the state talk about what's going on from the PHA side and initiatives that we're doing to try and encourage more landlords to participate in the Housing Choice Voucher Program. But Kimberly had asked me if I would talk just a little bit about a quick introduction to IHCDA for those of you who aren't familiar with our organization, but more importantly to set the stage a little bit about what does housing affordability, particularly rent affordability, look like across the state of Indiana right now, and why is this work so important? So to start off, for those of you who aren't familiar with us, the Indiana Housing and Community Development Authority is a quasi-state agency of the state of Indiana, and we serve as the State Housing Finance Authority. And in that role, we operate about 40 federal and state programs on behalf of the state of Indiana. Some of those programs have a full statewide footprint, and in some cases, like in the Housing Choice Voucher Program, we're covering those areas of the state that don't have their own local public housing authority or local community administering those dollars. So when it comes to the Housing Choice Voucher Program, we are covering parts of 83 counties of the state. So a pretty good footprint and running the second largest voucher program in the state after our friends in Indianapolis. But in addition to that, we do a number of other programs. We provide capital funding to for-profit and nonprofit developers to build affordable housing. We run a large number of single-family programs to help first and second-time home buyers achieve the dream of home ownership. And we also work on a large number of homelessness programs trying to reduce the occurrence of homelessness in the state of Indiana. So anything that's really kind of touching the realm of affordable housing, we have our fingers in the state. So our mission is to provide housing opportunities, to strengthen communities, and to promote self-sufficiency. And we really believe that the Housing Choice Voucher Program and our partnership with landlords helps do all of those things. Yes, we're providing housing opportunities, but by connecting people with vouchers and allowing them to get that first and foremost, that critical piece of housing, that allows them to then pursue other things, whether it's education or job opportunities or reducing homelessness they've been experiencing, whatever that may be. So we really do believe that housing needs to come first when we're dealing with individuals who have dealt with issues of generational poverty, homelessness, et cetera. But we know that the program serves more than that. So I wanted to look at some statistics on when we're talking about affordable housing programs, who in the state of Indiana needs those programs and why is it so important? Because when you look at the data across the country, people may think, well, Indiana is a very affordable place to live. Maybe these programs aren't as critical here, but it's just not the case. It's not true. So I want to run through some data, and I didn't put any of these on slides because I'm sure you've seen a lot of slides today. I just wanted to keep this kind of quick and conversational. But I'm going to start with some HUD data, and HUD provides great data you can break down on a state-by-state basis or a county-by-county or city-by-city to look at instances of housing affordability and where there are gaps. So I looked just this morning at the most current HUD data on the state of Indiana, and HUD defines people who are rent burdened as those who are paying more than 30% of their annual income towards housing and utility costs. And then above that, someone may be severely rent burdened if they're paying 50% or more of their income on housing and utilities. So in the state of Indiana, there are over 786,000 renter households. So 31% of all the households in the state of Indiana are renting, not owning. Of those 786,000 households, over 160,000 of them are paying more than 30% of their annual income on their housing costs. So we have a 21% rate of households who fit that rent-burdened category. But then when we look at the severely rent-burdened, those who are paying more than 50% of their income to maintain their housing, and I didn't duplicate, so this isn't also counting those who we counted in rent-burdened, you get another 170,000 people. So 22% of the renter households in the state of Indiana are paying more than 50% of their total income just to pay their housing costs. So affordability really is critical. And when you add those two categories together, the rent-burdened and severely rent-burdened, there are over 330,000 households in the state of Indiana who are considered rent-burdened by the federal definition, representing 42% of all renting households in the state of Indiana are rent-burdened and are struggling to either make those payments or they're making those payments at then the harm of what else? Not being able to pay for healthcare or education. And then finally, when we look at that even further, HUD also further defines what they call households that have housing problems. And when we take out those who are rent burdened, there's still an additional 20,000 renting households in the state of Indiana that they're not rent burdened, but they're living in housing where either there's incomplete plumbing, incomplete kitchens, or they're overcrowded for the number of household members in their household. So when we add all that together, we're close now to about 45% of all the renters in the state of Indiana are considered by HUD's definition to have housing problems. So that's where it becomes important for us to administer these programs as efficiently as possible and to build partnerships at the local level with landlords who are willing to accept individuals who have housing vouchers so that we can maintain that affordability, make sure households aren't rent burdened, and that they're able to save, that they're able to pay for those other necessary costs in their life. So the final thing I wanted to compare is when we think about, well, who likely is in that population of that thousands and thousands of people who are rent burdened. So I looked at the data two ways. First, I looked at minimum wage. So in the state of Indiana, the minimum wage is only $7.25 an hour. If I earn minimum wage and I work 40 hours per week, 52 weeks a year, my gross income before taxes is $15,080. Now, to meet that definition of not being rent burdened, if we're saying that that household that's making $15,000 a year, working full-time but at minimum wage, if we want them to not pay more than 30% of their income on rent, the maximum amount they can pay for a year for both rent and utilities is $4,500, which comes out to $377 a month. That's why these programs are so critical. Even more so now, let's look at those individuals who have disabilities and are on SSI. The federal benefit rate for the entire country, if you're an individual on SSI, you get $771 a month. That's your income. That's $9,200 for the year. So if we want that person to not be rent burdened, for the entire year they can pay $2,700 in housing and utilities, or $231 per month. So when we look at it that way and we think about who are we serving in our program, sometimes we hear landlords or communities having stigmas about the people who are the benefits of the programs or that need affordable housing or rental assistance. But here we can see people who are working hard, who are working 40 hours a week, individuals who have disabilities that are living on federal benefits, they can barely afford, and you can see are so priced out of housing. And we see those are largely the individuals who are receiving those housing choice vouchers and other rental assistance programs. So I know that was a lot of data, but I just wanted to share with you kind of that stage on who are we serving and why is it important to have these public-private partnerships. And that's really what the Housing Choice Voucher program is. It's a public-private partnership. We, the public housing agencies, are administering these programs, but without you, these thousands and thousands of households throughout the state are just at a loss without anything to do for their housing affordability. So thank you all for what you do. Thank you for partnering with us. For those of you who don't yet partner with us, please ask us questions. We'd love to have you come on board as supporting landlords in this program. And I know that on behalf of IHCDA, but also the 60-some other public housing agencies in the state of Indiana, we're committed to working with landlords. We have to follow certain rules, but we want to make our programs as accessible as possible. So give us feedback, ask us questions, and let us know how we can continue to extend those partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Good afternoon, everyone. Now we're going to have a brief discussion with these four right here about public housing authorities and participating in the voucher program and learn from their experience administering voucher programs. I'll give you a little bit of background on each one of these folks here. And I'll just remind the panelists, you got to push that button, I guess, to talk and push it when you stop talking, or else it'll pick up any noise that's there. First of all, who just spoke, we have Matt Rayburn. As he said, he's the Deputy Executive Director and Chief Real Estate Development Officer for the Indiana Housing and Community Development Authority. He oversees a lot of different housing programs there, real estate development, housing tax credit, TCAP, home improvement, partnerships program, CDBG, National Housing Trust Fund, Indiana Affordable Housing and Community Development Program, Indiana Housing First, of course the HCV program, and performance-based contract administration programs. So that's a whole lot of different programs with different regulations to learn. He's been there since about 2007, and he serves as a national compliance professional and Indianapolis on the Indianapolis Housing Trust Fund Advisory Board, and previously served as board member and chair for the Housing Credit Certified Professional Board of Governors. Next off, and with a biography that's impressive in its geographical breadth, Mr. John Hall here. He, before being the executive director for the Indianapolis Housing Authority, he was deputy departmental director with the city of Wichita, Kansas Housing and Community Development Services Department, which included the Public Housing Authority. He's also been with HUD in the District of Columbia field office and the Richmond field office. He's also been at South Fair CDC in Dallas, Texas, and he's worked with Bank of America's Real Estate Development Banking Group in Dallas and Houston. He helped administer he serves as Director of Nonprofit Development for the Upper Manhattan Empowerment Zone in New York, and he also graduated from University of Michigan in Syracuse, so he's been all over this country. Amber Scobie is the Executive Director of the Bloomington Housing Authority. She's responsible for a budget of $12 million, and they serve 312 conventional public housing units and 1,300 housing choice vouchers. Under her direction, the Housing Authority completed a strategic plan, Bloomington Housing Forward, that seeks to preserve its affordable housing rental stock and promote agency resiliency by converting public housing portfolio through the rental assistance demonstration, or RAD, that will infuse more than $17 million for unit and infrastructure repairs. And finally, we have Michelle Reynolds, the Executive Director of the Lafayette Housing Authority since 2014. They have a similar number of vouchers, 13, and they also administer special purpose vouchers such as VASH and Mainstream, and they also work in project-based voucher units for the cities of Lafayette and West Lafayette. And prior to that, she was Assistant Director of the Housing Authority, wrong bio. Prior to that, she was Assistant Director of Financial Affairs for the College of Agriculture at Purdue University. And like me, she's a Pittsburgh sports fan. So thank the panelists for joining. I'll start off with a basic question to kick this off. Just tell us a little about your housing authority. I know I mentioned how many vouchers each of your housing authorities have. What are your general market conditions? And if you know, how many landlords participate in your programs? We'll start out just with Matt.
Sure. So as I mentioned in my opening remarks, IHCD is a little unique in that we're considered the balance of states public housing authority. So we're covering, again, parts of 83 counties in the state, those areas that aren't covered by a local housing authority. So we have a total voucher authority of about 26 million, which is about 5,600 vouchers. We currently have just shy of 2,500 landlords across the state that participate with us and work with us, which is fantastic. As we look across our markets, obviously we're covering kind of a very wide variety of types of geographies and sizes of communities. But to be very generic, my comments would be that in rural areas, one of our biggest struggles is finding available units that can pass HQS. We have a lot of older housing stock that has not been rehabbed in years in those smaller and rural communities, and it can be very difficult, even if the landlord is potentially willing to accept the voucher, just to find quality. In the suburban areas of the state, we tend to find the issue is just a lack of interest in the landlords in accepting the vouchers. And in the state of Indiana, there's nowhere in the state that a landlord is required to accept a voucher. The state of Indiana, you are allowed to just, on face value, discriminate on the basis that someone has a voucher and say, we're not accepting you to live here. And the suburbs seems to be one of the areas where we have the hardest time getting landlord recruitment. And then the final comment I'll make is that kind of the other area we struggle a lot is those higher opportunity, lower poverty areas. A lot of times we see that in those areas, it's only the properties that are already federally assisted, the low-income housing tax credit properties or the home properties that are federally required through their funding to accept the vouchers that will accept it. So our struggle is always in maintaining quality and then recruiting more and more landlords since they always have the option to say no.
Oh, great. Hello, everyone. I'm John Hall. I work at the Indianapolis Housing Agency. And so a little bit about us. We service the entire county, Marion County. We have about 8,900 vouchers that we have the capacity to issue at any given time, and that equates to roughly about $50 million in volume each year. A little bit about our general market conditions. I'm going to defer to Matt for the quantitative, but I'm going to give you the qualitative vantage point. So when the market is hot, of course it's hot, meaning that when you see that we have private investors or landlords who have signs out promoting vacancies, our vouchers are usually in great demand. And then when you don't see the signage, our voucher holders usually have a more difficult time in finding places to lease up within our 120-day requirement. So that's my take on the market. Anything else?
No. Ms. Scobie?
Hi, Amber Scobie. I work at the Bloomington Housing Authority. We have 1,364 housing choice vouchers, including 80 VASH, or veteran vouchers. We have 245 active landlords. The most unique thing about our market is that Bloomington is home of Indiana University's flagship campus. So the student rental market is a huge driver and creates a little bit of a uniqueness for us. We're considered the highest housing costs in the state of Indiana, and we definitely feel that pressure for some of our voucher families. It's also about 60 to 65% renters in Bloomington and Monroe County, our jurisdiction, and only 35 to 40% home ownership, which in most areas that would be flipped. We definitely have an inadequate rental supply. There are some things happening in our market right now. Someone told me that works in housing development that our vacancy rate is 105%, and I don't even know how that's exactly possible. But there are some renovations happening with some of the dorms at Indiana University, and those students are being pushed and housed on the private market. There's some tax credit units being renovated, and so we see a lot of that work kind of tightening our market a lot, and so it's a lot of dynamics to try to stay on top of.
Michelle?
Michelle Reynolds, Lafayette Housing Authority. We just got new vouchers, so we were just awarded last month. We got 70 mainstream vouchers. We were one of 3 housing authorities in the state that got it. Almost half of the money, we got $433,000, and $900,000 was awarded to the state. Mainstream vouchers are special purpose vouchers. They'll be used to help what we call NEDs, non-elderly disabled. And so we'll work with one of our local supportive services to identify those individuals that are coming out of segregated settings, whether you're talking about they're coming out from being incarcerated, mental institution, rehab. So we are developing that right now, and we hope to get those moving come hopefully by March. And we have a very high utilization rate in Lafayette. We have over 1,300 vouchers. Our utilization rate is usually up over 99%. We have a VASH program. We have 33, and right now, I'll give a shout out to my VASH guy that's over there. We're overutilized. We are waiting for our new VASH to come in, so we're expecting 5 more. We try not to ask for more than our social worker from the VA can handle, because we only have 1. So we're excited to get final notification to have those 5. We also project-based, so a way for us to reach the homeless community is by project basing. We do 59 units for chronically homeless individuals in 3 different buildings. So we work with a local not-for-profit homeless services. Housing stock. Housing stock in Lafayette is really good. Housing stock in West Lafayette is not. As you can imagine, just like Amber said, it's a college town. Those rents usually go to the students, and they can get the bigger rents. So we do try to encourage our participants to still go and look in those areas out of the high poverty areas. And as you can imagine, the schools closer to Purdue actually have higher grades when it comes to when you start grading the schools. So obviously everybody wants to kind of be over there. But our community in general, we have very strong partners when it comes to social services. We work with many not-for-profits, and if we didn't, there's no way we could be overutilized. So that's kind of it.
So, Amber and Michelle, how do you think landlords perceive the voucher program being in a market heavy with students, and that being probably one of your main competitors for placing people into housing?
I think that the student housing market is really lucrative right now, and the way that they get financing, and for the landlords here, you kind of realize the cost of land in Bloomington is very high. The cost to finance new construction is very high because of that. I mean, it's just the way the financing works, and so it's hard to compete with building affordable housing or any housing that would serve perhaps our families as opposed to student housing. I think we have a lot of landlords on our program that are very small. It's not typically dominated by the multifamily, larger property owners. So we do try to really focus on a lot of those smaller property owners, doing outreach for them. But yeah, it's a lot of work to try to stay active and to promote our program and to stay competitive with the rents.
I guess one good thing is, we have good housing stock, and I guess you can see that fair market rents go up every year in our location. So that's a good thing. So we can encourage or incentivize our landlords by having higher rates. And we do at times go above the payment standard, especially if it's in those areas that are out of the high poverty area. We're usually over the fair market rents even to start with for base. So that's one way for us to kind of deal with, I guess, a difficult housing market, at least on the west side when it comes to the schools. But we are trying to work with more property managers to try to see if they would, maybe set aside, not all their units, but, maybe set aside 2 units in their developments to just kind of get an opportunity for a low-income family to get into that school district, to get into those services. The other way we're getting in there is on the west side. There's probably a lot of communities. Elderly housing it just seems to be a problem. They can't find affordable elderly housing. So we are project basing 24 units with a not-for-profit, and hopefully that'll be up by the end of the year, so we're able to carve those 24 out and get over on the west side as well.
Thank you. John, my question for you is, having worked in all these different housing markets, DC, Wichita, having lived in Houston and Dallas, what are the unique challenges trying to get housing authority residents placed with landlords in Indianapolis? What are the challenges with whether it's the legal environment, the rental market, that you face in getting vouchers leased up here?
I would say, of course, there's probably several things I could address there. Foremost, the market in Indianapolis, especially downtown, is really rapidly changing. There's a lot of investment. There's a lot of housing restoration that's happening, so it's driving the price of housing, both for sales and rental, up. So it's driving, I think, the demand or the supply of affordable housing farther out into the county. And so you get the spatial mismatch of where housing is to jobs, the nucleus of that. So we're starting to focus our efforts at going into the next 5 years into more of the transit-oriented development type of housing. So we want to be strategic in helping our participants address that housing burden that Matt talked about, and making sure that our households are spending less than 50% of their income on both housing and transit. So I would say that's the general challenge that we have now, and that's part of the plan of action that we intend to do going forward over the next 5 years.
Okay. And Matt, a similar question to you, but you are the balance of the state for Indiana. So you have a very different, I would imagine, landlord base than the student housing market that they compete in, or a big urban market like Indianapolis. And I was wondering what challenges you faced working with landlords and trying to deliver services to them for this program.
Sure. I think our biggest challenge is just that when we give someone a voucher, because our jurisdiction is so large, they may want to go so many places. So the challenge for us, and we have partners in the field that we contract with to do the in-the-field work for us. We have 15 what we call local subcontracting agencies across the state. Most of those are groups that are providing other services like Head Start and community action programs in the community, and are already working with the population. But those 15 subcontracting agencies across the state are doing the day-to-day intake and work for us, and we do the oversight and quality control and work directly with HUD. But our biggest challenge is just trying to find landlords throughout every corner of the state. We'll target large market areas to where we know there's going to be concentrations, but then when we have that household who wants to live in Elwood, Indiana, it may not be an area where we've ever targeted landlord outreach, and trying to help them navigate that and work obviously with the local subcontracting agency who has more of a footprint in the area. But for us, the geographic challenge of just trying to find ways to meaningfully do outreach and partnership building from corner to corner of the state is its own unique challenge.
Okay, my next question, and I'll start with you and go back around. This will be for everyone. What is your PHA doing that's different or making a big positive difference within your community and helping get landlords to participate in the program?
Yeah, so a couple things that we've been trying to do to get more and more landlords participating in the program is we have very actively this year increased events that we are either personally putting on or collaborating with to do smaller scale versions of events like this throughout the state of Indiana. So we did 4 statewide landlord outreach engagement events this year, and we've been partnering with a variety of groups. We partnered on a successful event in Bloomington just a few weeks ago, so it's identifying local partners and local public housing agencies. But we've also been doing a lot of work with a group in Indiana called the Back Home in Indiana Alliance, which is a disability advocacy group that works statewide on housing opportunities for persons with disabilities. Because when you add the double challenge of I'm an individual who has a housing choice voucher, there's already landlords that don't want to deal with that. and now I'm also looking for a unit that has accessible features, that pool continues to get smaller and smaller. So we've been doing a lot of outreach efforts around specifically recruiting landlords who are interested in renting accessible units, but any units throughout the state. So that's an area we'll continue working over the coming year, is launching more and more of these events and finding partners to help us do those events. And then just other things that we've been doing recently to try and increase utilization and get landlords interested is some of the exact things that Michelle has talked about they're doing in Lafayette. So we have increasingly been project-basing some vouchers. We've been project-basing some VASH this year to get dedicated units for veterans. And for a number of years now, we've project-based units throughout the state to deal with the homelessness crisis. So we continue to see project-basing as a valuable tool. Obviously, we want to make sure we're continuing to have a large number of tenant-based vouchers as well for housing choice and mobility. But I think we're continuing to see that trend that PHAs throughout the state are more and more willing to project-based as seeing a way that's a way to get dedicated quality units.
And in the city of Indianapolis and throughout Marion County, we focused this year on permanent supportive housing and actually trying to extend our partnerships across all of departmental silos and intergovernmental agencies. So I arrived here in March, and we had some low-hanging fruit in the sense that we were using our forecasting tool from HUD to depict that we needed to actually issue roughly 1,000 vouchers this year. And so we dedicated 300 out of those 1,000 for permanent supportive housing. So we're working with the Coordinated Entry System Program, the Coalition for Homeless and Intervention and Prevention, or CHIP, as well as the city and county, to make sure that we issue, I think so far we're over 200 issued this year, and we're trying to get to 300 before the end of the year to address homelessness throughout the county and to actually help provide the wraparound services to keep people in housing and not just have the continuum of homelessness actually persist.
In Bloomington, I think we've been trying to work a lot on promoting the program, doing a lot of speaking engagements, resources on our website, updating our brochures. We have a landlord handbook that's been recently updated, so promoting those kinds of resources. Also just really good customer service, so making sure that we have timely housing assistance payments, our direct deposits done really well, short waiting times for inspections. We try to do those within 7 to 14 days. We also have been working with households when they come in for a briefing. We supply them with brochures and some tips on how to promote the program. If they're looking for a home to rent, how they can talk to that landlord, and we've seen some good success for that. And when those landlords are interested in coming on to our program, we do a one-on-one meeting. So our Housing Choice Voucher Program Manager, Daniel Harmon, he will meet with that landlord one-on-one, and it really changes the dynamic in terms of explaining the program, which can be very detailed and complicated, but it's a setting where they can have a conversation, easily ask questions, and a lot of property owners are unique in how they might do business or who they're serving, what kind of properties they have, so it just gives a little bit more one-on-one attention to those new folks coming on board. And yeah, I think like others, we've been focusing a lot on project-based vouchers, so making sure that we are educating our partners at City Hall who might be approving some of the new construction, especially tax credit properties that are coming on board, that we get in that conversation early and talk about the vouchers that we have available at the Housing Authority to project base, and we're kind of building a dynamic with that property management team to start thinking about how we can bring them on board as participants in our program right away.
Michelle?
I guess to talk about one of the successful programs that we have, and I guess we're doing a little different, is our VASH program. And if, I don't know, is there anybody in here that doesn't know what VASH is? Maybe? Well, VASH is for chronically homeless veterans. So they do not get chose off our wait list. They have to go through the VA, and the VA will go ahead and do an assessment and refer them to the Housing Authority. So it's a little different. We do try to then recruit those landlords. You'd be surprised. There are quite a few that we're all Americans when you kind of look at yourself in the mirror. I might be an Italian, Mexican, but when it comes down to it, I'm American. And we all have this, I guess, just need to want to help those veterans that are chronically homeless. You know, living in the street, living in a tent, you know.
Thank you, Michelle. I'll start again with Matt, and this question will be for all of you. Now, we asked about like what kind of programs you're implementing. What are some of the things that you'd like to implement to perhaps retain and recruit landlords, but haven't gotten around to yet, or maybe their administrative or financial burdens keeping you from implementing those strategies?
Sure, so I'll quickly mention three things. So first would be just an expansion of the landlord outreach events we've been doing throughout this year. From just a timing and a cost perspective, we only got 4 of those done this year, but we want to build on that model and go into more communities. And what we're really finding is when we go out in the field and talk to landlords, the questions they usually have is perceptions that this program is going to be an administrative burden on them. So it's really kind of demystifying that a lot of the work is really on the PHA to do on the household verification and working directly with the household. And so we do a lot of debunking on, what really extra work would you be doing, debunking what HQS and inspections mean. So we're trying to get out and do more of that. Second, one thing we're really looking at is, so IHCDA puts a lot of capital funding out throughout the state to both for-profit and nonprofit developers. And under those program regulations, when they build those units with that federal or state capital funding, they're required then to accept vouchers on those units. But then we see those same developers, for and nonprofit, and those same management companies may own a property next door that didn't receive IHCDA funding, and they're not accepting vouchers there. So one thing we're trying to work on and that we have our eye on for the next couple of years is working with these landlords who we know they know how to work with vouchers. They're doing it in their tax credit properties or their home funded properties, but they're choosing not to allow it on their market rate properties. Working with them to say why? Why are you not doing it there? And what can IHCDA do to incentivize the partners we're working with to more broadly accept vouchers throughout their whole portfolios? So that's a big area of interest for us. And then finally, and this partially relates to your question and is partially just I'd kick myself if I didn't talk about this, so I'm going to shove it in here. But IHCDA for about 10 years has maintained a statewide housing locator resource called Indiana Housing Now. The website is indianahousingnow.org. And it is a free site for any landlord in the state of Indiana to list units for rent and for anyone looking for housing in the state of Indiana to look for housing. And when they go in there, a resident who's looking for housing, they can filter very specifically to say the rent's got to be below this, or it has to accept a housing choice voucher, or it has to accept my pet, whatever it may be. And then the system spits out possible available units for them throughout the state. Anyone who calls in or emails IHCDA looking for housing in the state of Indiana, that's the very first place they're referred. And we get almost 1 million hits on that website on a yearly basis. So it's a fantastic place for landlords to list and for residents to look for housing in the state of Indiana. We have a nonprofit partner who maintains that website for us. They go through and screen it to make sure there's not fair housing violations on the website or discriminatory listings. And an area we're working on improving is, again, a lot of the traditional IHCDA partners are affordable housing developers, list their units on there, but a lot of smaller landlords or market rate landlords aren't even aware of the website. So we're going to be doing a lot of push next year on advertising this system and the benefits of listing through Indiana Housing Now to smaller landlords, to market rate communities, and we've partnered with the Indiana Apartment Association to help us with that.
Great. What we're focused on at the Indianapolis Housing Agency is actually expanding and probably making our process a little bit more efficient with the outreach that we have with our landlords. We currently do what we call a landlord fair once a month. And in other places I've been, we've done this similar approach. However, we have also made it an opportunity for landlords to actually listen at the briefing session, so they're hearing the same things that the participants are hearing right when they get their voucher. But being there, offering their units right there at the same time the participant receives their voucher, giving discounts, perhaps like waiving application fees there on the spot to actually help to reduce the amount of time it takes for participants to find a place to lease up for that RTA to get submitted. So those are things that we're looking to strengthen here and to add those particular processes in place to make the process even more effective for everyone.
I think in Bloomington, we're really focused on recruiting landlords in areas that don't traditionally serve some of our families. So the east side of Bloomington, we see really low lease-up rates for vouchers. And so thinking about how we can create incentives or work with city partners, perhaps it's waiving certain fees. Our city has a rental inspection program, and there's fees associated with that. So if a landlord perhaps participates in our program, would the city waive some of those fees or reduce them? Property tax reductions for landlords that participate in our programs. We love the idea of the landlord mitigation fund. Just some of those tools that we can be creative and having other participants. We'd also, love to see these community conversations happen. Like, let's think about our elementary school attendance zones and how many of those schools are really having to put a lot of resources into helping kids get where they need to be at grade level. And we tend to see a concentration of low-income families in certain sections and certain attendance zones. So thinking about how we have this bigger community conversation about inclusive communities that are mixed income, mixed housing types, and how that impacts a lot of other future investment of our community for kids going to school and, health and education, access to fresh food, all of those kinds of things. So if we could just not act in so much of a silo, but trying to be part of those community conversations as well.
For Lafayette, our focus this upcoming year, and probably longer than that, is going to be on youth. So right now we are getting ready to submit our grant application for FUP vouchers. That's FUP, so Family Unification vouchers, and they are for youth timing out of foster care. And right now we do serve that population, but we can do it in a way where we get additional vouchers, which we can get additional administrative fees to have additional staff. So that all kind of comes together. So we're working with the Department of Child Services and also working with some other not-for-profits to get that MOU done. Also, the state, Balance of State, will have to come in and sign off as well as COC, coordination. So that's really our big thing. HUD is pushing for FYI, which is Fostering Youth Initiative. So just in case we don't get those vouchers, there's another opportunity for us to help those youth that are timing out of foster care. And we really want the other ones, though, because not only are you helping youth timing out of foster care, but you're also doing family reunification. So it comes on both ends. But it really has to start with DCS. So we're a partner, and we're an important partner. But just like any of the other vouchers, we cannot house them without the supportive services of whether you're talking about the Veterans Administration, you're talking about DCS, you have to have those partners, and without that, you're gonna have low utilization rates if you can't, get those people to come in and get those landlords to come in and explain to them the program. We have landlord workshops. We try to do those yearly. We have just started discussing about possibly having a walk-in day for landlords just to come in and, want to have a conversation, good or bad, a way for us to do some outreach that way. So that's where we're at.
Okay, I have one more question before we let folks in the audience ask questions. Two things that I've heard consistently, and I've heard it from a couple of people who've asked questions here today, and we also heard it, going out into the landlord listening sessions in the 7 cities around the country that we did. There are two issues that landlords often had were with what we call this vacancy window of how do we shorten it so that when they find someone to rent the unit, they can get them in the unit as soon as possible. What kind of things have you done to improve that? And communication is, what steps or what can you do to improve communication between landlords and PHAs? And whoever wants to take that.
Well, she's sitting back there, but we have a housing technician that has good communication. She will contact the landlord. She will bring them in. We usually have people housed once they get turn in their RFTA within 60 days, usually within 30. So it's a really quick turnaround. And we can't do that without also an inspector that is available. So we only work with one part-time inspector, and we still get it done. So without having a strong staff, that's one thing, but to be able to have somebody that can reach out to landlords, whether they're, sometimes it can be a little difficult, but you really have to have somebody that has some patience and to explain things. It's a confusing program, and I get that. And so we just need to continue to educate them with the landlord workshops and those other types of things that we can do just to increase the program.
So I'll jump in and say, one of the things that we're currently doing, we're recruiting for a communications officer for our agency-wide, but I envision using that person to help bridge the gap between the information and the actual feasibility of implementing a housing choice voucher from the landlord perspective. So I look to do, social media campaigns, to have forums where landlords can have access to us in various mediums, such as social media, as well as in-person meetings. What I have started is a roundtable discussion, and so a sample of that roundtable are landlords to try to get feedback and stay continuous with their pulse, what they're thinking and what their experiences are. And then the other part that we have recently done at the Indianapolis Housing Agency, we switched the way that we do our background checks. And so that has reduced our time down for probably about a week or two, about 10 to 14 days average reduction in processing. So we're trying to always find ways to shorten that length of time to once that voucher is issued to when the person actually moves in the unit.
I think first of all, I just have a really good team. Our voucher staff is wonderful. Our inspector is great. We have this goal of once the RAFTA is submitted to inspect the unit within 7 to 14 days. We've also been flexible with move-in dates. We do it on the 1st and the 15th, and just trying to adapt to what we're seeing, folks having issues leasing up and how we can try to help accommodate that. But just try to have really good relationships and good customer service tools.
I think the only thing I'd add is kind of a lesson learned that we've seen is, and I'm assuming we've all fallen guilty of this sometimes, but we all live in a world of the Code of Federal Regulations, and we get very technical. And as we've gone out and done more and more landlord outreach and trainings, and we've sat back and listened, I think one lesson we've learned this year is we've historically sometimes done a bad job. We get too complicated when we talk about this program, and we make it sound like something that a landlord would say, that's a lot of work, or I'm scared to participate in. So we're trying to do a better job and just continue to learn to say, maybe the landlord doesn't care what we're doing on the back end on our side on how we're verifying that someone's eligible for the voucher and what rules they have to follow to keep their voucher. How do we talk better about the things that the landlord really cares about, like how long do you have to wait to get paid, and how much are you going to get paid, and how much of a burden is that inspection versus not? So having our staff and our contractors do a better job of not doing super technical, dry trainings, but really thinking about putting myself in a landlord's shoes and what would they want to know, and trying to better tailor our message to that audience.
Okay, thank you. So I'd like to open it up to questions. I think we got about 10 minutes. I want to stick to that pretty strictly because we have Dan Williams coming on after that to talk about something I think you'll all be interested in, which is inspections and how they might change. So feel free to ask any questions you might have right now. Allison, I think. Well, I feel guilty because we're all kind of over here.
Test. One.
Questions so far? No? Okay. Wow. Okay.
Hello, my name is George Guy. I'm with Fort Wayne Housing Authority.
I want to piggyback off what Matt said. I think what he said is a great point in terms of where we're at now as housing authorities. We're in a unique opportunity right now to articulate our message a little different. I think sometimes we get caught up into the regulations and all the different things that we have to do. And I think we have a unique position now to communicate to landlords in a way that is straightforward. You know, talk about how much investment we're making in the community every month, every year. And also talk about the investment in people. I think we're afraid to do that at times. And I think those are the things that we're doing in Fort Wayne, and I know some of the other housing authorities are doing as well. And it's just really revigorating what we do and what we're doing it for. So I think that was awesome, him saying that, and that's the new way that we need to be doing that in terms of our messaging.
All right, there's a question.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dave. I wanted to pick up on what you coined the vacant window.
I think someone said it earlier, so I won't take credit for that. But
yeah. I like that. That is one of my. You get past all the the hurdles and the different things, educating the landlord. You still got time. Where her and I, or that person and I agree, then it gets into your hands, and now we're sitting waiting. I got a unit ready to rent. And I'm waiting. Now, on the market, I can rent it tomorrow if I approve. You're waiting 7 to 10 days, another 10 days, for what? We're both waiting. The residents waiting, we're waiting for you. If we like the program, which I do, and all of that, but that's, you said about, this is the first time I heard someone say about the 15th. All my agencies, they all got to move in on the 1st, other than if they're a new occupant, or they've got their current unit failed abatement and they can move. Other than that, it's always on the 1st. And well, if it's the 1st, if I can't do that, I got to go to somebody else. And we have good people, but the window doesn't work for me. I can't leave a unit sit for almost a month waiting for you. I'm not putting you down. I'm just saying the process has got to change. If you want me to be more attractive to you, all things else being the same, time. My renter is going to rent. You're costing me money. If we agree on the set price, you're costing me money and time. But the 15th, I even asked them years ago, why can't we at least do halfway in the month? And they said they couldn't. But you're the first one I heard it say that. What's that?
Where are you, first of all? Where are you, first of all? Because I want to.
I'm in northern Indiana.
Okay.
I'm in northern Indiana. So I'm looking to invest down here, but anyway.
If I could interject, I know that at the Indianapolis Housing Agency, we don't have a cutoff. However, I will explain it a little bit further. So the first of the month is always ideal. We do another mid-month HAP payment, which is around the 12th. This month is going to be the 12th of December. That does not prohibit anyone from moving in after the 12th. We just will not pay the next HAP payment until January's payment. But anyone can move in at any time.
I'm not worrying about the payment. That's going to come. I'm talking about when I can start the clock. You move it, get them, we agree, get it inspected, sign the lease, move in. Give the keys. That time there is what I'm crucial for us.
Thank you.
All right.
And I think that's part of what we're trying to do here is, and it sounds like a lot of the folks up here are trying to accommodate the different dates, but there's a lot of PHAs out there, and things like this, hearing from landlords, as well as hearing what other PHAs are doing, or hopefully help people adopt best practices to try to encourage landlords to participate in the program. Yes?
So my name's Angie. First, I want to thank you guys for everything you do, because all of us that are landlords out here and all of the clients that you have, you speak with everybody, right? And we're all coming to you. So thank you, and for your teams too. Shout out to Bloomington Housing. The communication is always spot on with our company too. So I can say that what she's saying we've experienced firsthand. One question I have, and anybody can answer it, is we're in a lot of different areas, so we have a lot of different housing authorities we work with, and some will accept our lease and the dates on our lease and the late fees on our lease, and other areas want us to sign a different lease that has different lease dates that match with the voucher. So most of our apartments are tax credit, and we always want our leases to match our TICs, and annual research are only done every 12 months. So we can't do 2 research in 1 year to match a housing authority voucher lease. So I've been on site. I'm no longer on site, but I guarantee a lot of our managers have just given you another lease that's not really our lease. And the late fees, maybe we have 2 leases out there, but they always have, like, we only have 1 late fee. So is there a plan to be able to kind of streamline if a voucher date is different than a lease date, or do you have some advice for those of us that are experiencing that? What's the best way to handle it?
I would just quickly jump in, and I'm actually not going to address it from the voucher side, but from the tax credit side, since IHCDA allocates and monitors all the tax credits for the state of Indiana. From a management perspective, I understand why it's easier and you may want to, but there's nothing in the federal or state tax credit rules that requires the dates on the lease and TIC to exactly match. So if you need the lease to match your public housing authority's requirement, it's okay if the tax credit TIC dates are different than the Section 8 lease. So as you're working with, possibly up to 63 housing authorities across the state, if it's easier to just adjust your tax credit process and instead of trying to change a bunch of different public housing authorities, that's one way you could look at it. But I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on the voucher side.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. One more question?
Who's next?
I saw someone back there.
All right. Well, you've already gotten 2 questions today. You're going to share with your friend?
Well, he can.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. This question is, well, it's not a question for John. I'm going to ask for a commitment. One of the biggest things, it's a pet peeve for me and probably other landlords. When I go to turn in an RTA and it's not on the landlord, it's not on the walk-in day, on the Wednesdays, I end up having to wait an hour and a half to turn in an RTA. I would like to see a window that's a window maybe 2 to 3 times a week where I could run in there, get the date time stamped on that RTA, and get out. That is very time consuming for me because we run an apartment building and we've got other things to do. Landlords have other things to do besides sit there and wait an hour and a half to turn in the paperwork. Now, I'm also in complete agreement with this fellow here. The transition time, 7 to 14 days to get a inspection assigned. And then once the inspection is done, another week or 2. So we're almost out to 30 days before we can get that tenant actually in the unit. But my commitment for you today is the window for the landlord to just go straight in there, get a date time stamp on that thing, and turn it in and get out of there. Now, you mentioned that you had sort of some sort of task force for that landlords sit on where you can get ideas. Did I hear that right? Yes. I certainly would like to be part of that if there's room.
I just had a quick question.
Oh,
You mentioned
sorry.
something?
Just to kind of address, and we're not in the same jurisdiction, obviously, but we do have a Dropbox. So we try to make sure that we're accessible even after hours. So you can turn your paperwork in whenever you want. And it's not only for landlords, but we need to make sure that our participants also are doing that. But I think another thing to make the process go a little quicker is that we need to have more education. Okay. Sure. Right. So one of the other things is for the landlords that are in here is to understand HQS. if we're going to come inspect and you're already waiting 7 to 14 days, you're going to end up waiting another week if you end up failing. So I think the communication there has to be, when we come, we really want you to pass the first time. Like, so you're not waiting longer. So if there's confusion when it comes to HQS and what's going to pass and what's not, that's where our inspection team can come. We have landlords that come in and say, you fail me on this every time. Okay, well, let's figure out how to make sure you don't fail it every time. And that makes the process go a little quicker.
Sorry, go ahead.
This question is for Mr. John Hall. You said IHA is moving toward transit housing in the future. Can you elaborate on that?
Okay, no, we're going to focus our strategic resources along transit-oriented development, just basically meaning where transit, with the bus rapid transit like the Red Line and other bus stops, where those travel centers are, housing that's within a half a mile of those, we're going to try to target our resources to recruit landlords, as well as our asset management side of the shop, to have resources along those lines, just to help our program participants lessen the burden, the amount of money that they spend on housing, transportation, cost. And then to go back to the lady, I know you sound like an IHA customer. The situation, it sounds familiar to me. So at IHA, I am very committed to process improvement. The whole, 1 day a week thing, whether it's the RTA drop off or whether it's something else for our clients, I am not an advocate of 1 day a week. We're open 5 days a week, so we will be moving toward expanding our services to everyone. That comes with, I'm gonna have to shuffle some staff and duties and all that stuff. So I'm working on that, and hopefully I can roll it out in the first part of the first quarter of 2020. I can't say specifically for the landlords, but I can tell you, you will have more than 1 day opportunity to drop off the paperwork that is more conducive to your schedule and your business operation. Okay, so I hope HUD is listening, but our resources are limited, and so we will do the best we can, is all I can commit to you right now.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to mention a resource I think would be really helpful to a lot of people in the room, and while I have the microphone, I'm going to take advantage of it. We have a partner organization called South Central Indiana Housing Opportunities, and they have a website called housingforhoosiers.org, housing4hoosiers.org. And right when you go to that website, the first thing you'll see is a Renting in Indiana handbook, and it was done in partnership with Indiana Legal Services. It could be a great resource. It talks about how renters can find a place they can afford, understanding a lease, utilities, deposits, all those things. So check it out. I recommend it. Housingforhoosiers.org, and it's the number 4.
Okay. I want to thank our panelists, Matt, John, Amber, Michelle. Thanks for participating, and thank you to all of you for listening. We will. Thanks. Oh, yeah, you're fine. Okay. For our next speaker, we're going to have someone I've known for a long time, Dan Williams, who started out at the same time with me at HUD as a Presidential Management Fellow 10 years ago. Now he's the program manager managing the Inspire project that's going to supply us with a new inspection standard for the voucher program. So he is going to come up here and talk about that today. Thanks, Dan.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to come speak to you about Inspire, which is the way HUD is changing the inspection program, not just for the HCV program, but actually for all of HUD's programs. So Inspire is an acronym. Had a few people ask, how do you spell that? So it is the National Standards for the Physical Inspection of Real Estate. Some of these slides are more applicable to sort of the project-based programs, but I'll try to tell you how they would affect the HCV program as well. We wanted to give that sort of broad overview of where we are right now with Inspire. So REACT does assessments. We do the inspections for the project-based programs. You know, unlike the HCV program where the PHA does the inspection for public housing, for the multifamily PBRA, REACT is the one going out and doing those inspections today using the UPCS standards and in the future using the Inspire standards. And then we are making sure that this new approach, the Inspire approach, is really focused on the residents and the units. So those of you who are familiar with kind of the old way, we have been doing inspections. You see a lot of things around asset preservation, cosmetic type deficiencies that score a lot of weight to the site, building systems, common areas, exterior, a lot of deficiencies around that. Those still exist, right? We're taking still that holistic approach, but we're focused on the residents and those issues that could affect residents. First and foremost, we've been asked by the Secretary to make sure that resident health and safety is the #1 priority of the new inspection program. And I think you'll see as we continue to roll out aspects of Inspire that the new standards themselves have that focus at the forefront. So our goals, like I said, obviously the goal of any HUD program is to make sure our residents are living in safe, habitable housing. We also want to make sure that the standards and their ability to be meaningful are aligned to health and safety. They're more accurate, they're more consistent. It's stuff that you all as landlords would agree, yep, that's a problem, and it's a problem that should be addressed, versus I understand maybe why I got cited for that, but I don't really understand why it's an issue. And then we want to make sure that the standards are aligned. We've gotten some feedback over the years. There have been a variety of pilot programs and other demonstrations of how might we align to a single set of standards. There's UPCSV, which some of you may be familiar with, which was an effort to take the old project-based standards and apply them to the voucher program. That's been running for a few years. And then Inspire has taken the lessons learned from all of those efforts and coupled them with a brand new set of physical inspection indicators. So Inspire has essentially 3 pillars, but for the HCV program, the top doesn't really apply. But for the project-based programs, we actually have 3 levels of inspection. So if it's public housing or, like I said, the multifamily project-based Section 8, we will be collecting the self-inspection from the owners, and we're using that as a risk tool to counterbalance the inspection we do as HUD on an ongoing basis. So that REACT contract inspection, again, that's not going to apply to the HCV program, but more on the project-based. And then as needed, HUD goes out itself with its own staff to do inspections. But the last 2 buckets really do apply directly. So the standards themselves are going to be resident-focused. Health and safety, first and foremost, you're going to see a larger number of health and safety indicators. And I forgot to mention this, but all the standards are posted on the Inspire website. There are links within each one, so you can give quick feedback. Please take a look, right? We want feedback from everyone to know, are these a good set of indicators for assessing housing? And then that applies no matter which program you're running or participating in. Encourage your residents to give feedback too, right? We want this to be as collaborative and as open process as possible. We're taking that feedback and making refinements. But so health and safety, first and foremost, most of the standards are around that. Then second is function operability. Do the things work? Does the toilet flush? Do the lights come on? Does the HVAC work? So that's where you're going to see in those first 2 categories, 90% of Inspire is about that. Condition appearance can be important, but only when it affects livability. So you're going to see a lot less deficiencies around market appeal type things. Those are explicitly excluded from Inspire, except again where it may affect residents. So graffiti, infestation, some things like that. You are still going to see those, but there are much, much fewer wear and tear type deficiencies in the Inspire standards. And then the inspectable areas. So HQS, those you're very familiar with that, right? That's a long form that's in sort of room-based. For the UPCS, that has 5 areas. We're trying to simplify around stuff that makes sense, logical groupings. So if you're inside the unit, you're inside the unit. If you're outside, you're outside. And if you're inside the building, you're inside the building. So some of those common areas that it's unclear, well, does it apply? Does it not apply? Should I inspect this? Should I not? Hopefully the way we're describing the Inspire through the guidance will make that more clear. Really, you want to make sure we're being transparent, that everyone's being fairly assessed. So, any two inspectors should do the inspection the same way. As a landlord, it shouldn't be a surprise whether you're going to pass or fail. They should be very clear and understandable. This doesn't apply, but it's there anyway for you. This is the scoring for the project-based side. This is very new and different, but I think it reflects the lessons we've learned from our work with the voucher program. The voucher program obviously has the unit and the resident at the forefront, but the project-based programs really didn't to the same extent. So just for those who may not have known, on the project-based side, you could have gotten a passing score of at least 65, but have lost all the points in the units. So that was one of the things that we've been asked to correct. So under the new Inspire program, for the project-based properties, you have to pass the units because that's the focus. Obviously for the HCV program, since it's a unit-by-unit inspection, each deficiency is the pass or fail versus the overall scoring. But that's sort of how we've taken what we've learned from our work on the HCV side and applied it to the other programs. So where are we? So we have two demonstrations. There is a big demonstration for the project-based programs. So PHAs and owners can volunteer their properties to participate on that side, as well as the ongoing UPCSV, which is migrating into an Inspire demonstration soon. So that, I believe in Indiana, we have one PHA on the UPCSV side, and a couple who've already signed up for the project-based Inspire demonstration. So that's how we're going to be testing stuff. We're going to be rolling that out. We've already started at a few properties near the Washington, D.C. area. We're going out, we're testing the standards with some of our staff and with contractors, really talking to owners. That's how we're approaching this. We're saying, hey, if we see an issue, is this an issue you think would make it into your maintenance plan? How would you address it? Do we have the right foundational set of standards? Because really it's all built on that. Scoring comes later, the processes come later, but if we don't have the right set of things to look at, then we're never going to get to a good place. There are strong points of alignment, like I said. We did sort of apply the lessons learned from both the voucher demonstration and sort of 20 years of experience doing inspections to set up Inspire. They all are about modernization, and I think you're going to see that in a couple areas. One is it's all electronic, so as Inspire comes into effect, all inspections will be done electronically. That should help with some of the delays that some folks experience between getting an inspection completed, getting some paperwork back, signing it back and forth. We're also encouraging electronic correction of deficiencies, so if you can provide evidence that something is corrected, it would save a re-inspection on site. And then there's some other ways we can use sort of the current state of technology to enhance business processes. So I think you'll see that. Those of you who may have seen the UPCSV demo, they've seen significant administrative reductions on both sides, both on the landlord and the PHA side, moving from paper-based processes to electronic processes. We've also found that a lot of deficiencies that we thought were really, really important aren't really being affected. We're either not seeing them being cited very often, or it turns out the way they're addressed, the way the landlords and PHAs agree to resolve them, wasn't really what HUD intended. So we're taking that and applying it into the standards themselves. So we have done a few things to sort of let people know what's going on. We recently published a notice in the Federal Register about the demonstration. We received quite a few public comments on that. Here's a word cloud that says, what were the big things people were most concerned about, right? Resident, so that's great. We're all here because we care about housing people. So we were happy to see that all, the comments and the points of alignment were around the residents. Standards are important. Health, safety, fairness, process, right? All the things you'd expect to see. So we want to continue to encourage you to give us feedback and participate in whichever way you can. Even if you're not in a place where your PHA is participating in one of the demonstrations, that's okay. We're trying to be as transparent as we can. All the information is on the Inspire website. Go read it, give us feedback. Our contact info is there. So we're happy to hear from you and happy to hear your lessons learned. You guys, somebody said earlier, you're the boots on the ground. Absolutely, right? We don't claim to know everything there is to know about maintaining and managing properties. So if we have these standards wrong, we want to hear from you. So how does it affect you as landlords, right? We want to make sure that you have detailed information about the property. I've had a few owners come up here today and say, look, as an owner, I like the inspection because it gives me some insight into my property. If maybe I'm an owner who's not local and I have a management agent, it lets me know that they're doing a good job. So it gives that sort of transparency across that same level of insight, but that only works if the standards are consistent, right? If one inspector is treating you one way and another one a different way, then that level of information is not quite as useful as it could be. And then we want to have more consistent and accurate inspections, right? We don't want to prevent somebody from moving into a unit that was otherwise okay because somebody misunderstood what HUD expected a standard to be. So we've tried to draft the Inspire standards as clear and understandable as possible. So even if you're saying, yeah, technically I think that one's okay, but it's confusing, give us that feedback, right? We want everyone to understand and apply them in the same way. For residents, it gives you a point of conversation. Unlike the existing HQS and UPCS standards, the Inspire standards have a section called the rationale. That's essentially HUD's reason why we think they're important. So for any particular deficiency, it says, here are the specific reasons why HUD thinks this is an issue. So when you go to have those conversations about how can I repair or mitigate a hazard, the thinking is right there, right? So HUD is concerned about this because of its effect on health and safety, this particular effect. So, don't just do cosmetic repairs, address that underlying health and safety concern. So that's a big difference. Frequently, I've been at HUD over 10 years and I get questions of, well, why is that a deficiency? We can't always answer that today, but in Inspire in the future, we hope that that's clearly communicated so that we don't have to have those conversations, right? It's right there on the document. And if you want to have a more sort of conversation about it, then that's a good starting point versus we aren't sure because we all read things in a different way. PHAs, right? Those who participate, collaborating with HUD is always great. We need to hear from you. It also gives you the ability to move to some more consistent processes. We've seen, again, from both sets of the demonstration, there's excitement about getting to the standards. People want to know what the rules are, and they don't want the rules to change. So if they're clearly understood, that brings some fairness to what we're doing. And inspectors. So sometimes these can be a difficult group of people to change, right, because it's new and it's different. But, I work with a bunch of inspectors. I have some who work for me. We've talked to hundreds, if not thousands, over the years. They want to know what we want them to inspect and how to inspect it, because they want to do a good job, right? And they want to do a good job for all of you. So that's another thing that we've kept close to heart as we built the standards is everyone should be able to understand them and apply them, right? We can have the best written standards, but if nobody understands how to apply them, then they don't really do anything for us. So Inspire's trying to pull together all these things we've heard from these type of symposiums and others and really make a better set of inspection programs, processes, and standards for the future. And for HUD, right? We want to reduce costs, make sure the data is more available, and at the end of the day, for all of our stakeholders, make sure residents are residing in safe, healthy housing. Like I said, here are the demographics. Right now we have a couple, one PHA in the voucher demonstration, and then, 16 properties who have signed up for the project-based demonstration. Like I said, we've just started the project-based testing. That'll continue over the next year and a half. The voucher program is sort of on a parallel path, but it's a little bit further behind in terms of the standards. So they're still using the UPCS-based standards, but once the Inspire standards are tested and stabilized on the other program, they'll be migrated over to the UPCSV, which becomes the Inspire V demonstration as well. So Inspire is the sort of way HUD is aligning. You'll not hear HQS or UPCS anymore. It will all become Inspire, and where we are right now with this demonstration and these things we're moving forward on is that first step of alignment. Here's the links. I can make sure we post at least our set of slides on the Inspire website. If you Google HUD Inspire, that's probably the easiest way to get there. And then there's the link to the UPCSV demonstration as well. So I want to make sure I left time for questions and to hear from you, right? So questions, comments, things you want to hear about or give us suggestions on of these are really important things you should check for in an inspection program, or here's some less important things that maybe you should consider not checking for. Places of inconsistency you've seen. That's all helpful to us as we try to improve. And then please wait for the mic if you have questions. So any questions? Yes. Mike.
Sorry, our friends in broadcasting can't hear us if we don't have the microphone, so apologies. Thank you for waiting.
Yes. Will third-party vendors be able to load this software into their own devices, or are they going to have to get the software from HUD? How is that going to work?
So HUD is going to make the standards available. HUD is trying to not have to provide software. Not that we necessarily wouldn't, but yeah, the idea is that we would publish the standards in an open way, and that any vendor who you already use or work with would just be able to load it in.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So is the inspector going to take a picture of each violation then?
Yes.
Okay, and who has access to those pictures?
Who has access? So the PHA, the inspector, and the property would have access to those?
Okay, so we just email these to them?
Email.
I mean, how are they getting the pictures from the PHA?
It's through the inspection software. So you mean after correction of an issue? So during the inspection, they're using a handheld like an iPhone or a tablet to do the inspection and take the pictures, and that's creating the inspection result. And like the gentleman asked, which software, right? If you're already in a Yardi or some of those packages, it's built into the software. For the electronic closeout, that's going to be PHA by PHA specific of how they want to receive that. HUD's not going to be collecting the correction of deficiencies directly. That's a PHA landlord thing, but what we have seen is there's portals where you just upload attachments, and that seems to be working fairly well.
So it's software from our software person that we're going to have to purchase?
Yes.
A couple questions. What's going to happen to the 52580? Is that still good? What's the PIC submission after an inspection?
The PIC submission?
Yeah. If you upload your 52580, the HUD inspection checklist, as a pass or fail into your software?
Right.
And then that gets submitted to REACT.
So right. So the result of that 52580, kind of the yes/no, comes across on the 5.8 as the date it was done. So that's more how your particular software works. But the questions that are on the 52580 are going to change to the Inspire questions. So some of those mechanisms are going to be depending on how your software company works. But the actual things the inspector checks for, the deficiencies, the items, that's going to change.
So the 52580 will go away?
Yes.
It'll be a thing of the past?
Yes.
Any more questions? This is the inspections man. Lay them on them.
Questions about REACT, inspections more general, they don't have to be HCV questions, or they can be HCV questions. Feedback too, this is your opportunity to let HUD know things that are important from a property management perspective that should or shouldn't be part of the inspection process.
Okay, I just have a quick question. I don't know if it should be directed to you or whether it would be more of an office type thing, but when we get an inspection and say you fail, okay, and say it's failed and we send maintenance out there to make the repairs, and say it failed a second time and now but we don't know, like everything was repaired except maybe one item, but when the repair list comes back to us, it still has everything on it, so you're just kind of guessing what didn't pass. We don't have any way to know, and when we call in inspections, they say, you just failed. And we'll say, well, which item did we fail? And they'll just say, we don't know, you just failed. So I don't know how to tell my techs, I don't know what failed. Go back and, So I would like when the inspection comes back to say, pass, pass, passed. This is the item that failed. If that could be done, that would be miraculous.
So we know some PHAs do already do that today, and that's one of the things HUD thinks that moving to electronic-based inspections will help with. You'll kind of know in real time what is passing and failing. So from our perspective, you know, that's where we see that efficiency and that transparency coming, but those specifics at a local PHA level, you know, that's one you want to talk to about with your PHA or the field office staff who are here.
It would be loaded on there so we could go in there and whatever passed, and whatever failed, it wouldn't be a guessing game anymore.
Many do that, and we would encourage others to do that as well.
I haven't had any luck with that, but hopefully we can get that resolved. Thank you.
I attended a meeting in Washington with a group from NARPM, which is a National Property Manager Association. And when we met with your representative, one of the items that was universal across the United States was an issue with annual inspections placing tenant-caused items as an owner responsibility. When you create this new software, will there be any way for the inspectors to be aware of move-in standards, which of course everything is an owner's responsibility, versus annual inspections, which some items are more than likely going to be tenant responsibility?
So that's a good suggestion, and we'll make sure we're including that in the sort of list of best practices. Like I said, HUD's not really designing software specifications. What we're saying is here are the standards that each PHA would need to apply when their staff do inspections. So each PHA is buying or using a paper-based process, they're either buying their own software or using kind of their own process. But that's a great suggestion of helping identify when it's a brand new, a move-in inspection versus an annual or recurring inspection.
So could that be something that's in your standards and then reasons?
Standard, sure.
On your list of what's going to be performed.
That it's the type of inspection?
Well, not even that. Let's say, for instance, hole in the wall.
Right.
So you could have a comment, if it's an annual inspection, that would be a resident item, not an owner item. Within your, I forget what you called it, but you said you could click through and see the reasons.
Sure, so the rationale.
That's it.
Yeah, that could be something we could include. We actually do have a maintenance section. Certain items kind of are identifications of maintenance issues and others are not. So that would be a good example of one where, you know, the explanation is this is probably on a one unit instance, not something that's a reflection of maintenance, but like on a project based, if we're seeing this in all the units, then maybe that is starting to be a maintenance issue. That's a good example, yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions for Dan? All right. Well, thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
All right. Who's ready to discuss things at their table? Everybody? All right. Well, here are the prompts that we have for you to talk about amongst yourselves at the table. What has been the most useful session of this symposium? And I will say that my session is next, so it's okay if you don't have an answer yet. What would you recommend for future symposiums? So I'm not sure if you all are aware, especially folks that came this afternoon, this is the first one. So any feedback you have of how we can improve them in the future would be really helpful to us. And if there's one thing, just one, that you could change about the voucher program, what would it be and why? So folks from HUD will be floating around the tables to hear some of your suggestions and ideas as we do this next table discussion. But before we do, our yoga instructor has one last exercise for us.
I'm going to be nice. All right, guys, go ahead and take your seats. We're going to try to get you out of here a little early. If you can cooperate and sit down and stop talking, you might get to go home early. It's like school. Gotta bring this up a little bit or I'm going to be bending down. All right, guys, so just while you're taking your seats, I'm going to say a couple things again. Hopefully you can understand me. I know there's a lot of kind of bounce back in the room with the mic. If I don't have your email and you want the slides, in other words, if you didn't register beforehand, I don't have your email. So if you want the slides, there's a sheet at one of the blue tables. So go there and put your email down or you're not going to get the slides. All right, guys, can we sit down and be respectful? Thank you. Yes, I know. I'm glad that you're all enjoying chatting with one another. That's great. I hope you got to meet some new folks. All right, because anything you say gets bounced around the walls and everybody can hear it, I'm going to wait until everybody's being quiet to start. Thank you. Okay. So I think most of you have picked up on this by now, but my name's Leah Anderson. I work for HUD. I work for the Office of Public and Indian Housing, the voucher program in DC, and within that office I work in the program support division, which basically means I wear a lot of hats depending on what's needed in the various offices of the voucher program. I'm also one of the leads for the Landlord Task Force, which is why I'm here today. So I am going to send these slides out hopefully today, if not tomorrow. We'll see what time it is and if I can see straight when I leave here. I will say one thing. So at the bottom of the slides, this one and the last one, there's an email address, landlordtaskforce@hud.gov. I look at that email and I look at it every day. It's on my phone. So if you have something that you want to say to HUD, you can send it to that email. I know a lot of people think that the emails that are generic aren't going to go anywhere. I look at that. It's on my phone. So, so with that, I think Allison's going to kick us off, and then I'll talk to you a little bit later about what we're doing in HUD related to landlord participation.
Thanks, Leah. Good afternoon. Thanks for staying with us. I may be partial, but I think this is one of the best parts of the day, so it'll be worth your time. I'm Allison Bell. I work with HUD's voucher office in Washington, D.C., so thanks for having us to Indianapolis. It's a beautiful city that you have here, and this venue is lovely. Before I joined HUD in July of this year, so I'm a little bit new, I worked at a think tank in D.C., so they have me talking about research today, but I promise I won't bore you. I'll give you just the high points. And before that, I ran a 4,000 unit voucher program in Baltimore and worked with about 1,200 different landlords. So I like to think my role here at HUD now is to bring practice in the field with research along with developing regulations, which is part of my new job at HUD. So I appreciate the comments about making sure that on-the-ground experience makes its way all the way up. So we are out here talking to you guys and really taking what you have to say to heart. So as has been said many, many times today, we depend on landlords to make this program work. And as you know, it's a national program. So we serve about 2.2 million different households across the country. And what might work well in Indianapolis and in Indiana might not work well in San Francisco or in Maine. So to better understand what's been happening with the voucher program across the country, HUD has partnered with recently 2 different sets of researchers to talk to landlords and see what the experiences are all over the country. So from a research perspective, I'm going to talk about what the findings have been, and then Leah is going to talk about the landlord task force that has been out in the field throughout the past year. But the 2 studies I'm talking about are more academic research studies by independent research firms. So what I want you to walk away with today is not any sort of memorizing the statistics that these researchers came up with or understanding standard deviations, which I've never wrapped my head around. But what I want you to understand or take away is that HUD is taking the challenges that landlords face and that housing authorities face and tenants face and making this program work very seriously. And they're coming at it from a lot of different angles. So they've hired academic researchers to look at what's going on with the program, what are the challenges and what are recommendations to improve it. They're talking directly to landlords, they're talking to housing authorities, and a whole lot of energy is going into this. So I know being an individual landlord, you might not feel necessarily heard. Doing your day-to-day on the ground, you might want to throw your hands up sometimes. But I encourage you to hang in there and to know that HUD really has been making a lot of efforts when it comes to landlords. So thank you for coming here today and feeling like you could share your thoughts and know that we are taking them very seriously. So the first study I'm going to talk about was conducted by researchers at the Urban Institute, which is a think tank in Washington, D.C. And they looked at whether landlords in 5 different rental markets took vouchers. So on the slide, you can see a link to the study. And like Leah said, we will send you these slides after today, so you don't need to feel like you have to write this down. But the study was called a pilot study of landlord acceptance of housing choice vouchers. And researchers looked at 340,000 advertisements for rentals across the country. And what they wanted to know is, do landlords take vouchers? And where do they take vouchers? And do they discriminate against voucher holders? And do you have any guesses of what they might have found? Yeah. So as you might guess, the results vary by rental market, and the results will show that voucher holders do have a tough time finding a landlord to rent to them. So the researchers worked in Fort Worth, Los Angeles, Newark, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. And you can see the percentage of landlords that deny voucher tenants, meaning the researchers went out and they just asked a landlord, do you take vouchers, basically. And what the slide shows is in Fort Worth, 78% of landlords said no, we don't take vouchers. What do you think it would be in Indianapolis? 50%, you think? In Los Angeles, it was close to Fort Worth at 76%. Philadelphia was close to 70%. But then in Newark, New Jersey, and Washington, D.C., a much lower percentage of landlords denied tenants. And why do you think that might be? What was that? Not quite, but close. They have source of income non-discrimination laws, meaning that the jurisdiction has adopted a law that said you can't outright deny voucher holders just because they pay for their rent with a subsidy. You have to at least consider them on their merits as you would any other source of income. So jurisdictions that had source of income laws had a much, well, generally speaking, had a lower rate of denying voucher holders. But you'll see in Philadelphia, even though they had a law, it didn't prevent discrimination. That means probably the law wasn't enforced that well. The study didn't get into a great amount of detail on this. This was like an additional finding. It wasn't the main point of their study. The main point of their study was what's happening out there and are landlords denying voucher holders? And then that leads us to this landlord task force. Well, what can we do about this? How can we improve the voucher program? Why? Why don't landlords want to rent to voucher holders? So then the second study that HUD commissioned looked more directly at the experiences of landlords, and you might hear yourself echoed in the sentiments that landlords shared in this study, where researchers interviewed 127 landlords across 3 different jurisdictions, and 3 different jurisdictions than this Urban Institute study. They looked at landlords in Baltimore, Cleveland, and Dallas. And they wanted to know, what do you like about the voucher program, or why don't you participate in the voucher program? So this study, again, available on the website, and we'll send to you, was called Urban Landlords and the Housing Choice Voucher Program. So they went out and they just directly talked to landlords, interviewed them, had a standard set of questions, and found out why landlords like the program or why they don't like the program. And one thing I wanted to highlight for you today is what we found, or what the researchers found, which is quite interesting, is that it isn't inadequate rent. It isn't that the voucher pays less than market. In a lot of places it pays market pretty well, meets the market. But 51% said any inspection issue was a motivation for them to not participate in the program. That was a much bigger issue to them than lower rents. Similarly, for lack of PHA support, so when we talk about customer service, we're seeing this, that the sentiments you guys have shared, customer service, come through in this academic study, right? That landlords don't want to participate because they have an issue getting good customer service from a housing authority. And everyone's favorite, paperwork, is also pretty high up there. So given these findings, and from hearing from landlords like you, HUD created a landlord task force. And Leah is going to talk to you about all the findings from that over the past year. So thank you.
All right. Hi, guys. Long day. Thanks for being here. I'm going to try to make it interesting and engaging. Let's see how I do. Yeah, so in spring of last year, Secretary Carson decided to form a landlord task force at HUD. And he did this because a lot of recent research, as well as people, have been telling us that landlord participation in the program has been decreasing. So we wanted to figure out specifically why, what do landlords not like, and then what can we do about it. And so that's kind of what happened. The task force formed last year, and it includes people from several different offices within HUD, including our legal office, our Office of General Counsel, Fair Housing, PIH, Public and Indian Housing, FPM, Field Policy and Management. So a range of folks with expertise are in this task force. And since we formed last year, and this comes to present day, it's kind of a timeline, but not really. Last year we held listening forums and focus groups, and there's more detailed slides on this in a minute, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, across the country. And then we also did a PHA focus group last fall. Last fall we were mainly focused on talking to landlords, but we had a lot of PHAs that really wanted to have an opportunity to provide input, so we did that one focus group last fall. This spring and summer we've been holding focus groups and doing interviews with PHAs across the country. Almost all of them are non-MTW, to figure out what they're doing to increase landlord participation in their area. And again, I'm going to talk about all of this more in a minute. This is kind of like a table of contents slide. And then we're starting our landlord symposium. So this is the first one of hopefully many. So when we say we want your feedback, we really do, especially on content. We have definitely experienced some challenges with this venue, which we will take on. But the content would be great if you guys would let us know if it's interesting, relevant, what's missing, what did you expect to hear here that you didn't. because then when we do this in the future, hopefully people will enjoy it even more than you are today. Yeah, so this was last year, 2018. This was crazy. This is how I got pulled into PIH. So in 2 months' time, we held 7 listening forums in different regions across the country, different HUD regions. And we planned those in maybe a month and a half, which for any of you that have been familiar with the federal government for very long is crazy that we were able to pull that off. And we did 4 focus groups in 4 of the 7 places that we did listening forums. We chose the places we did listening forums and focus groups based on a variety of factors, including wanting some geographic diversity, wanting some places that had MTW versus not MTW PHAs in the immediate area, what the local vacancy rate was, local PHA performance. We looked at a bunch of different factors to do that. And then we did 1 virtual focus group that we arranged with FADA. It's an industry group for PHAs. And again, we covered 6 regions. We talked to 330 plus landlords, and I know some people don't like that term, but for me to say property managers, property owners, realtors, I don't know who else is involved in managing property, but it's just too much. So that's why we call you landlords. I'm sorry if you don't like the term. I'm just trying to not have to say those 5 things. So on the, let's see here, the right-hand side of the screen, those are the locations where we held those listening forums, and the places with the asterisks, that's where we held the focus groups as well. We did have a final report come out of these, and very exciting, drum roll, we have a public summary that will soon, very soon, be becoming available on a website that I will show you in a little bit. So I'm going to talk a little bit about like what we heard, but there will be more information forthcoming on that. If you're a landlord, you probably know a lot of the things that we heard, or you can guess them. But it's still nice to hear kind of if things around the country are similar to what you're experiencing here in Indiana. So the main incentives that we heard, so we did ask folks at the beginning of these listening forums, so we didn't get a lot of responses, but we did ask, what do you like about the voucher program? And these are the main things that people said they liked about the voucher program or that they thought were incentives to participate in the voucher program. So wanting to help people, that's a big one for a lot of folks. Having a reliable source of income, knowing they're going to get that HAP check every month. And then if there was a state or local program that helped landlords, that was also really helpful. Some of the biggest barriers, and these are kind of like categories of barriers, and we're going to talk more about this later, but lack of support or communication. We've already heard a lot about that today from PHAs, from HUD, from inspectors. Inspections and tenant-caused damages. So again, we've heard a lot about that already today. Application and move-in process, this kind of includes all that burdensome paperwork. Voucher approved rent amount, so the differences between market rate and what the voucher covers, and administrative delays that are related to the additional paperwork you have to do with a voucher tenant. So this is now moving mainly to this year, so what we've been doing since, I want to say June, so June to, it's still kind of ongoing because we're going to need to do some additional follow-up, but we did 1 focus group with 7 PHAs last year, and then we did 3 focus groups with 14 PHAs in mainly August, maybe 1 in September, and there was 1 that was small PHAs, so all less than like 1,000 units, 1,000 vouchers, excuse me, 1 medium-sized and 1 larger size. So we definitely wanted to talk to PHAs that had varying capacities and were dealing with different situations. And then what we're doing, and that's why this could change a little bit, is based on those focus groups, we're going back and doing interviews with some of those PHAs to get more information. And we're asking very specific questions in those focus groups and interviews. So we're asking like, you know, what are you doing? And then how are you funding it? How did you get board approval to do that? Who came up with the idea? So we're trying to get as much information as we can so that we can help other PHAs across the country replicate if it seems like it's something that they might want to try. So at the bottom, it just shows that the smallest PHA that we talked to had about 600 vouchers, and the largest had about 50,000. So these are strategy areas for being a better partner with landlords. I'm going to talk about a little bit that's not on here just to expedite my presentation a little bit later on. So when we've talked to PHAs, these are kind of the areas that they've said they're doing something to encourage landlord participation. So customer service, just being providing better customer service, answering the phone, answering the emails, being open so you can drop off paperwork, things like that. Technology, so using a landlord portal, direct deposit, outreach and communication materials. Somebody earlier mentioned a landlord handbook, landlord engagement events, things like that. Additional training for tenants, optional training for landlords, monetary incentives, so that would be like the security deposit, assistance, vacancy loss payments, things like that. Partnerships, especially partnerships around funding, to try to figure out how they can creatively fund some of these things when they don't have a lot of extra money floating around. Conflict resolution and inspections. So we're going to go more into depth, which is why I kind of went through that kind of fast. So what we're doing right now, and this is why I want to kind of preface this for later, is the reason we're talking to all of these PHAs about what they're doing and asking such specific, detailed questions is we're developing a strategy guide that will be available hopefully by June of next year. We're going to release it in chapters, or that's the plan, for PHAs on how to be better partners with landlords. And those are the chapters, basically, what I showed you. Those are the chapters of the guidebook, and then there will be specific strategies in each of those chapters. So customer service, landlord liaisons, landlord-only phone days, landlord email addresses and phone numbers. Just really quickly on this one, landlord-only phone days, there's a housing authority in Oregon that on Friday, they take calls from landlords and only from landlords, and the landlords love it because they know they can call on Friday and someone's gonna pick up the phone and answer their question. So something that was relatively small for them to do, but it's had a huge impact. And that comment we got from a landlord in Oregon when we did a listening forum last year. So that's not from the PHA, that's from a landlord saying how impactful that's been. Landlord liaison, something that's interesting about this that we've heard is that depending on the PHA, some of them are really interested in having a landlord liaison with a social work background, and some are interested in having a landlord liaison with a real estate background. So, and Amanda, you could probably, no, yeah, I see you nodding back there, but so it really depends on kind of what you're looking for and what you need at your agency, but those are the types of things that will be in this guidebook. You know, when should you look for a landlord liaison with a social work background? What should you look for in the qualifications? What should your job posting look like? Here's a sample job posting. So it's really meant to be like, we want to give you the tools to figure out what will work for you, and we're going to give it to you from 5 or 6 different PHAs that have all done it differently. They've all funded it differently. They've looked for different qualifications, and you can see what'll work. I'm really excited about it. I'm not going to read these because I think you'll all zone out, and you're going to get the slides later, but these are some of the quotes we got from landlords last year that I think are really great. So PHA-led landlord outreach and engagement. I'll start by saying that this is modeled after a housing authority's landlord symposium. So we've heard that PHAs are doing a variety of things to connect with their landlords on top of, you know, emails and letters and things like that, such as having advisory boards. We heard a little bit about that earlier today. Briefing sessions for landlords to help them learn about the program, meeting with housing provider associations, and appreciation events. I think this is pretty straightforward, so I'm going to skip through. Improving the inspections process. And I will say not everything on here is necessarily currently passable, but it's things that could improve the inspections process and that we're thinking about. So better communication. So something we heard a lot in our listening forums last year was how a landlord would get a notification that they were going to have an inspector come on some day, but that was it. And they didn't get a specific time, they didn't get a specific window, and how that was a really big waste of their time and their resources. So just better communication on when is the inspector actually coming, and when do I need to send somebody to the unit. Consistency and transparency, we just heard a lot about that from Dan, so I'm not going to dwell on that. Reduced frequency of inspections. So under HOTMA, you can do biannual inspections. Triennial inspections are maybe something to explore in the future. Move out as pre-qualify inspections. So if a PHA wanted to do a move out inspection for a voucher tenant, and the landlord said the next tenant was going to be a voucher holder, letting that move out inspection qualify as a pre-inspection. I don't believe that's currently possible, but I'm not a policy expert, but it's something we're thinking about. Oops. Another quote from Atlanta. We've talked about this today as well. Participant training, some more education opportunities for voucher tenants, and for landlords, optional training for landlords. And the training for landlords might be similar to what we had this morning with Mr. Harris from the law firm. Like, you know, how do I build my business? how do I understand how I can legally evict a tenant if they're not in compliance with their lease agreement. So stuff that's applicable to all landlords and not necessarily just voucher tenants, and not just an overview of regulations. Yeah, so somebody in Atlanta said education can solve a lot of issues, and I think I've heard that at least once today in the room. Streamline and go digital. Yeah, so I work for the federal government, and we move slow, but we do try to move. So some of the things that we're trying to do and that PHAs mostly can do, electronic signatures, web-based forms. They still have to be the standard HUD forms, but PHAs can do web-based forms. Online portals. So some of the things we've heard from landlords that they really like with these online portals are being able to see their inspections, when their last inspection was, if it was a pass or a fail, when they got their HAP payment. If they have a lot of voucher tenants, they can see all of them in one place. So that's something we're putting in the guidebook. Is specifically like what do landlords like about the different portals that we see. And then direct deposit, which I shouldn't say most PHAs, but a lot of PHAs offer and landlords really like. Monetary incentives, so signing bonuses. So something we've heard that PHAs are doing is if you're an existing landlord on the program, if you bring a new unit on the program, you get a signing bonus. So maybe it's a couple $100, that's really nice, a little bit of an incentive. If you're not a current participating landlord and you decide to start accepting voucher tenants, you would get a check in the mail, so a little bit of an incentive. Vacancy loss payments while you wait for that inspection. Security deposits and damage claim funds kind of serve the same purpose because one of them is you're paying on the front end, one of them you're paying on the back end, but it's basically to pay for damages to the unit, unpaid rent, and then better aligned fair market rents. There's something else I want to say on damage claim funds, but I think I have a slide later. So this one's really interesting and not something that we hear a lot of PHAs talking about, but I think has the potential to be extremely impactful. So when we were doing these listening forums, one of them was in Atlanta, Georgia, and I don't remember the specific number, but I want to say it was like somewhere around 8 public housing authorities are operating in the Atlanta, Georgia area. So imagine if you're a landlord in that area and you have units all over that area, you're going to be dealing with 8 different PHAs that have 8 different processes. And yes, some of them do need to be the same in certain aspects, but PHAs have a lot of liberty and flexibility in how they administer their program. So something that a couple PHAs are trying to do is just meet with other PHAs in their area and figure out how they can better align what they're doing with the other PHAs. And you might not be able to on everything. You might not be able to get everything to be totally similar, but where can you come to somewhat of a common ground so that it's less burdensome for landlords to remember, when I call this PHA, I have to ask them this question in this way on this phone number. And when I call this PHA, I have to send them an email with this form that has this inquiry. So stuff like that can just be really nice for landlords to not have to keep track of how PHAs prefer to receive information or go through their processes. So I almost took this section out because I didn't know if folks would be interested, so I'm just going to breeze through it really quickly. And this is mainly anecdotally from me thinking about basically all the information we've gotten over the last year. So the 5 things that I would say have come up the most from landlords that they would like to see that are pretty tangible and approachable. The first is a single point of contact for landlords with a quick response. So that's like the landlord liaison, or if you don't have a landlord liaison, maybe your ED or your HCV director is very responsive to landlords, and that's a priority for them to respond to landlords. Enhanced communications from the inspections team. I just mentioned that, giving them better than an 8-hour window for when your inspector is going to show up. Damage claim funds. Something that's really interesting about this that we heard around the country is that having the damage claim funds helped landlords feel better about participating in the program. And it wasn't necessarily tapped into super regularly. It was just the fact that it was there as a cushion, that they could tap into it, that they were more willing to rent to voucher holders. And one of the things I'll add on the damage claim fund that I think is brilliant, and I can't remember which PHA this is, but I'll look it up. So there's a PHA that we've talked to that has United Way funding to do their damage claim funds. And what they do is they tell the landlord, you have a year, so the first year that they're on the program, that you can access this damage claim fund for up to $1,000. And if in the first year they're a great tenant, you decide to renew their lease, they're still there, then you no longer have access to that $1,000 and they can repurpose that for another tenant. So there are very different creative ways that you can fund these things, which is hopefully something you'll get out of the guidebook. Direct deposit, pretty simple, but seems to have a big impact. I don't know how I'm doing on time, guys. And then engagement events. And these are relatively, from my perspective, relatively low investment for the PHA and high impact. Biennial inspections, landlord-only phone days, damage claim funds, and again, that's because if you establish one, a lot of PHAs have found that people just aren't tapping into them that much. So that's why it's relatively low resource investment, and landlord relations working group. Current efforts, we've talked about some of this already, so we'll breeze through it really quick. Continued conversations with landlords and PHAs, that's these symposiums right now. It might take a different format in the future, but right now we're trying to do quarterly symposiums across the country. The strategy guidebook that I've been talking about that hopefully is coming online starting in maybe February with the complete guidebook by next summer. The landlord webpage, which is where this recording, if it gets approved by our legal team, will be posted, as well as a lot of the studies that Allison talked about and a lot of other things that are relevant to landlords. And then next year, I'm really excited about this. We're doing 3 webinars. The first one's going to be the end of January, and we'll focus on a deep dive into what we heard last year in the listening forums. And then the next 2 are going to be on basically what I'm presenting on, but in much more depth for what HUD is doing around landlord participation. And they'll all be online, they'll all be free. You should all be getting invites to those if you want to register. Oh, and I just went through this, so there you go. There's a little bit more information. Okay, so here's the web link. So this is a work in progress. So if you go to that website now, which you can, it's live, a lot of the links will say coming soon, and that's, we wanted to give you guys something. So it's there, it's live, I'm gonna show you it in just a second, but just know that we're gonna be building that out a lot over the next 6 months. So here it is, and I know that this is a small screen, so take a look at the slides and the web address, but the studies related to landlord participation are linked on here. We're working on developing content that explains like fair market rents, payment standards, small area fair market rents, to a landlord that's not like the jargon, but is much more digestible. So we're really trying to create materials that are approachable and useful for the landlords, and this website will be where all of that is housed. And the webinars. Future possibilities. So you all know about MTW, or moving to work, where PHAs basically have additional flexibilities in how they administer their program. PHAs have to apply. It's a competitive process, but there is a possibility in the future that there will be a cohort that focuses specifically on landlord incentives and landlord participation, and seeing what works well or what works best in different markets across the country. I like this quote. It's just saying it's not us against them. Landlords and tenants need each other, so we need each other to be successful. And with that, I'm going to wrap up. Again, my emails on the bottom are the email that I monitor related to Landlord Task Force. I'm happy to connect with any or all of you. You'll get the slides, so you'll have that. Yeah, so with that, I'm going to hand it over to, well, I guess we can take some questions. Yeah. Do we have any questions? Anything you want me to go back over that I went through too quickly? Anything you want me to elaborate on? No? Awesome. Are you shy because I don't have the
microphone? So you have a lot of really great ideas for incentivizing landlords. Is there ever going to be sort of a website or repository that kind of has all of the long lists of the different housing authorities and what they've done and what success they've had with different strategies?
Yeah, so the strategy guide or guidebook, I'm not sure what it's going to be titled, will hopefully have case studies for all the housing authorities and what they're doing. We have to get approval from the housing authorities before we post that, but that's how we're getting this. We're not coming up with all these brilliant ideas. we're getting these ideas from housing authorities, and it would be great to be able to continue to just add that information to the website. We are going to make it a web-based strategy guide, so it will be in a format that's not a PDF that's a big pain to update, but something that we can continually update online. And if any of you in the room are public housing authorities and you think you're doing something really great, which I think there are some of you that are doing some great things, if you want to reach out to me, I'd love to talk to you about how we can get what you're doing included in the guidebook.
Hello.
Hi.
I have a couple questions.
Great.
So if you're offering an incentive fee to the landlord or you're paying for damage claims, because in the 90s, damage claims were covered at the housing authorities. They were able to get reimbursed. Yeah. So now that went away. Yeah. So this money's coming out of an admin fee pot, I'm assuming? These incentives?
Some of them are getting money from the state, from other funders. It can come from a variety of places.
Can we see some statistics on it's coming from someone's admin fee or if it's being donated by a state? Is there anything we can look at in your presentation that you can post online? I'd be interested in knowing that.
Yeah.
I was wondering how it affects the housing authority's admin fee since they're so prorated and so low.
Oh, so you're asking if they fund it through an admin fee, what percentage of their admin fee is going? Okay, because I thought you were asking how many PHAs that have it are funding it with an admin fee. I don't think we'll have that anytime soon. And I don't know that we'll have that either, but I will work on it. We are asking them like the budget and how they're funding it. So one of the reasons we still have some more interviews coming is to follow up with the PHAs we've already talked to as we start to flush out this guidebook, when we're like, oh, hey, we'd really like to know what percentage of your admin fees are you putting towards this damage claim fund? Yeah. So we'll try to find out, but it's not something we're collecting right now. Okay. But I'll definitely make a note of that.
Yep. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, if you have questions, you have my email. Don't abuse it, but don't be afraid to email me. I am very responsive. It's something I pride myself on. If it takes me more than 2 days to respond to you, I'm probably in the hospital or on vacation. So with that, I'm going to hand it over. Our last session today is going to be with Nick Bilka. He's the policy advisor for Stephen Durham, who's the director of Office of Housing Voucher Programs. And he's just going to talk to you about kind of the new updates and things that are happening related to the voucher program. Some of it's pretty new and exciting. If you don't live in HUD PHA world, hopefully Nick will do a good job at distilling it down so you can understand it. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Nick.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to try to be relatively brief. I know we're at the end of the day, and some of this might be duplicative of things you've heard before. So I'll try to be merciful and keep this brief. First of all, one of the things that people usually ask us in terms of the status of the program is, of course, the money, and when are we going to know how much money we have next year? As you probably know, although the fiscal year starts October 1st, it's rare when we actually have our appropriations by October 1st, and usually there's a CR for a couple months or even longer. This year, there have been a few events. In August, the President signed the Bipartisan Budget Act, and what that did is it lifted the caps that were put on in the Budget Control Act in 2012. And if any of you all who work for PHAs remember sequestration, that was a product of that act. And that's when we had prorations that I think something like 93% of HAP. It was a real challenging time. So this means we're probably going to get a pretty decent number this year. Those caps would have led to significant cuts in this program and other program automatically by law. But we don't have an appropriation yet, so we don't know the exact number. We're going to be under a CR until December 20th. We were under a CR until November 21st, I think. So what's going to happen? I have an answer for you, which is I don't know. It's not a very good answer, but you can look online, you can read and see what's going on. You can hear 3 different accounts of whether they're close to reaching a deal or whether this is going to end up being another CR that goes forward for another couple months. We just don't know, but we'll find out in the next couple weeks. But to get a sense of what we're looking at, this here gives you an idea of what the House and Senate have passed, either through committee or their whole bodies, for HUD's appropriation for 2020. Now, just the raw numbers probably don't tell you a whole lot unless you're really familiar with the program. But basically, these would give us pretty similar prorations to what we've had in the last couple years, somewhere in the 9% range. For HAP renewals, admin fees about the same level, somewhere around 80. The only major divergences here, tenant protection vouchers are a bit lower under the Senate bill, and FUP is 20 million lower, and the mobility demonstration is not funded in the Senate bill. But we'll see in the coming weeks how that ends up. Based on our past experience with history, looking at those marks is a good area to guess where we'll end up in 2020. I think you saw a number of graphs this morning, so I won't repeat them. But basically what we've had develop as trend over the last few years is that PUC costs are rising significantly, at least in comparison to what they were before. When I started on this program in 2009, through 2015-ish, PUCs were per unit costs were relatively static or increased very slowly. That's just our version of inflation, those costs going up. The more PUCs go up, the less families we can serve with the same amount of money. So that also indicates that rental markets are tight in a lot of areas, so rents are going up. And that affects our participants and how many people we're able to house. So in accordance with that, as we've gotten more vouchers over the years, our utilization has gone down somewhat. We've gotten some special purpose vouchers that we talked about with VASH and Mainstream. These are a little harder to house families with these programs. We've also got some other special purpose vouchers. Family Unification Program awarded $30 million in vouchers. These are for instance, youth aging out of foster care, or families that have had a child have to leave their household because they have inadequate housing, bringing them back together. We received $20 million more in 2019. Depending on which version we get there, we'll either have 40 or 20 million. A huge thing that we've gotten in recent years is Mainstream vouchers. These are for non-elderly disabled individuals. We got, I think, $515 million in the, I believe it was 2017 appropriations, and we've been continuously awarding these out. We just announced another award of 100 and some million, 131, 15,000 vouchers. So these are additional vouchers that are going to go out in communities to help people with disabilities be housed. In the state of Indiana, there were 145 vouchers awarded to 3 PHAs in the state. And there's going to be another NOFA awarding additional funding, so there's going to be more vouchers coming on. Another program that's been big in the last 10 years in fighting veterans homelessness is the VASH program. We received $40 million in 2019, and this is something we continue to try to maximize our utilization with those vouchers because we've made tremendous strides in reducing veterans homelessness. The mobility demo, which Allison spoke on a little earlier today in response to a question, is a demonstration. It's mostly the money goes through mobility services. It's not a huge amount of vouchers, but we're trying to see what mobility services will help people get housed into high opportunity neighborhoods. And there's a component of that involves seeing what services will incentivize landlords to participate in the program and to serve these families in the high opportunity areas. The Landlord Task Force, they covered some of the upcoming events, the best practices guidebook that's going to be coming out next year for PHAs, webinars. We're going to have more symposiums like this. We'd say our relationship with landlords is vital to the continued success of the program and success of the program into the future. So we appreciate all you do, and we appreciate you coming out here today to listen and to share your thoughts with us, and we hope you continue to do so. And just closing out, I'd like to make a couple thank yous, which is to the Indiana field office who did so much work in organizing this. Kimberly and Bruce and their whole team has been outstanding and great partners to this. All of the presenters and people who've came here today from places that are further away than I expected, southern Indiana and northern Indiana, all over the state, and Ohio. I'm really impressed with the geographical diversity of the crowd. And I would like to thank HUD's broadcasting team for dragging all their stuff here and for the CGI that they'll do to give me hair when they actually present this on the web. I really appreciate that, guys. And finally, Leah's back there, but Leah has done so much work in making this event happen. So I'd like Leah Anderson, I would just like to get a round of applause. She's done a tremendous job organizing this and trying to keep everyone limber today as we sit for a long time. So thank you, Leah. I don't have an introduction for someone who needs no introduction. It's Kimberly Wise, the Director of Indiana's Field Office.
Well, all good things must come to an end. So I guess it's my duty and my absolute honor to thank you guys for all being here today. We really appreciate it. We hope you learned something. We hope you're able to take something back. If you have any suggestions, this is going to be something that will be replicated around the country. If you have any suggestions for things that we can do better, things we can do different, please feel free to leave those on the comment cards. You also have the email addresses for all of our staff here in Indianapolis. Please feel free to shoot us an email. The other thing I noticed, some of you took a whole lot of notes. Some of you took none at all. You need not worry. For every email address that we have, we will send out the presentations that you saw on the screen. So if we have your email address, we will send it out. It is a very large document, so be prepared if you want to print it. It's probably well over 100 pages, but you will have all that information. So on behalf of the Indianapolis field office and the entire HUD team, we want to thank you for being here. And then I personally, again, just want to thank the PIH staff, our new PIH permanent director, Bruce Nezerum. If we could give him a hand. So congratulations, Bruce. We are so glad that you're in that position and that we now have permanent leadership in our Office for Public and Indian Housing. To Valerie, raise your hand. Valeri's been one of those people who've been running around. You know, she kind of got thrown in the mix, but she's been running around and being so helpful. And Valerie, I just want you to know how much I appreciate you, how I appreciate your efforts. We also have John, Jennifer, and Evans are over in the corner. I want to make sure you guys know them, put a name to a face as well. They're also a part of the PIH team. And so again, I just want to thank you all for being here. Please have safe travels home. For those of you who have to go a bit of a distance, feel free to take some of the snacks that we have on the table, and safe travels and Merry Christmas. Thank you.